We are back with major new updates in the case of 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro, the baby reported missing out of Yucaipa, California. In the last few days, disturbing new revelations have surfaced that point not to a kidnapping, but to a cover up, a tangled web of lies, secret searches along the California freeway, and whispers of a jailhouse confession that could explain why Emmanuel may never be found. Let's hope he can be, though, because tonight we're unpacking what investigators now believe really happened and the shocking new details that could change this case forever. Thank you for continuing to care about baby Emmanuel. And as we've covered from the beginning, Emmanuel's parents, Rebecca and Jake Haro, were arrested on suspicion of murder, and investigators no longer believe Emmanuel is alive. That theory gained more weight just days ago when Jake led officers to an area along the westbound shoulder of the 60 freeway in Moreno Valley. With cadaver dogs at the scene, the search appeared to be focused on locating Emmanuel's body, fueling speculation that Jake had confessed and was showing authorities where to find his son. But when the search came up empty, many wondered if Jake was sending investigators on a wild goose chase. On Wednesday, we've learned new information that helps clarify what actually happened. Stick with us as we break down the latest details. And for this episode, we have a lot to unpack from a recent video posted by News Nation senior reporter and podcast host Brian Enton. But before we get into it, I do want to share this info has not been substantiated by investigators. Although as of today, Brian stands by his source. Still, this is secondhand reporting that I'm doing, and we will circle back to what this could all mean in just a bit. In the video, Brian spoke with Kim Degonia, a former Riverside County prosecutor who likely has more insight than most into how both Riverside and San Bernardino counties handle investigations. And according to Brian, an inside source claimed that after Rebecca and Jake Haro were arrested, Jake allegedly told police that he had been sleeping with baby Emmanuel and accidentally rolled on top of him. And when Jake woke up, Emmanuel was dead, and Jake said he panicked. The source went on to say that Jake decided to bury Emmanuel in a remote area so he could later visit his son's grave to mourn. That, according to the account, was the reason for the search with law enforcement out of Moreno Valley. So if this source is accurate, we now know Jake's original story to police. However, these searches, even with cadaver dogs that failed to turn up Emmanuel or any evidence, it casts serious doubt on Jake's account. And given Jake's track record on severe lying, deflecting, and shifting blame, police would understandably be skeptical of this version of events. It's hard to believe that someone who previously abused his infant daughter so severely that she was left with permanent disabilities would suddenly have a child die in his care purely by accident, especially when recent photos of Emmanuel raised concerns by many of us about general well-being under his parents' care. Brian also reported that investigators chose to use a strategy known as a Perkins operation. A Perkins operation is a law enforcement technique where an undercover officer or informant is placed in a jail cell with a suspect to gather information and elicit incriminating statements. The operation is named after the Supreme Court case Illinois v. Perkins, which established that Miranda warnings are not required in this situation because the suspect does not know they are speaking to a law enforcement officer, thus eliminating the coercion that Miranda is designed to prevent. The goal is to obtain confessions, admissions, identify co-conspirators, or locate evidence for serious crimes, often when other evidence is weak or time is a major factor. And according to Brian's reporting, during the Perkins operation, Jake allegedly told the undercover inmate that he killed Emmanuel and placed his body in a trash can about a week before Rebecca reported him missing. And if this account is true, it could mean Emmanuel's remains had already been taken to a landfill by the time police were called. Brian's guest explained that waste management officials told the sheriff's department that it would be nearly impossible to trace which truck picked up that specific trash bin or which landfill it ultimately ended up in. That makes the task of recovering Emmanuel's remains extremely difficult, if not impossible. However, I do want to point out that while difficult, cases have been solved by locating remains in landfills before. In fact, many cases. One of the most well-known examples is the case of baby Quentin Simon out of Savannah, Georgia. He was placed in a trash can that was later emptied into a landfill. Investigators and volunteers worked side by side, sifting through literal tons of garbage. Weeks later, they located remains and were able to determine his death was murder. His mother, Leilani, was ultimately found guilty of murder. And with that in mind, investigators absolutely have the capability to track which landfill services which trash bins. And if Jake or Rebecca actually confessed to which trash can or dumpster Emmanuel was placed in, law enforcement could at least narrow down the search site. It would be painstaking, exhausting work to dig through mountains of trash, but it is not impossible. But again, Jake already has a proven history of lying and deflecting blame, so it's likely investigators have very little confidence in any version of events he puts forward at this point. Another interesting tidbit that Brian raised in his video is that even after Jake allegedly confessed, or at least appeared to cooperate with law enforcement, Rebecca is reportedly still sticking to her original kidnapping story. And this has led many to wonder whether she could be experiencing a mental health episode or if she simply isn't aware of what Jake is saying and doing. Either way, she continues to maintain this narrative, a false narrative, according to investigators, which has fueled speculation that she may be protecting herself or maybe has been the victim of coercive control or feels compelled for a number of reasons to keep up the charade. Some have wondered if it's possible that her behavior could be influenced by the way the mind responds to trauma or fear. I'm not a psychologist, but luckily I happen to be married to one, and he is the co-host, and he is a clinical and forensic psychologist, also known as a criminal psychologist, and he plans to come on very soon to talk about this exact thing as well as other aspects of this case, so stay tuned. Now, let's get to what we do know about the case, confirmed by investigators themselves, because today, which is Wednesday, Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin opened a press conference by introducing the case. Hestrin explained that it was appropriate to address the public now because the defendants themselves had already held their own press conference, one in which they lied about their son being kidnapped. And then he introduced San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dicus, who walked through the investigative process. And that process began on August 14th, 2025, when Rebecca reported that Emmanuel had been abducted. But within just 24 hours, investigators obtained surveillance footage that exposed inconsistencies in her story. That same footage also showed there was no vehicle involved in any abduction, which meant an Amber Alert, of course, was never triggered. And from there, investigators spent hundreds of hours analyzing forensic data tied to vehicles, tied to phones, tied to the crime scene, crime scenes, and multiple search warrants. Through this work, they determined that Emmanuel's murder most likely occurred in Riverside County. That finding placed the case under the jurisdiction of Riverside County prosecutors, though both Riverside and San Bernardino authorities are continuing to work the case together. Sheriff Dicus explained that San Bernardino's high-tech crimes unit uncovered proof of several key details that he could not share publicly at this stage, but the evidence clearly showed that the couple's original story was simply not true. It was a lie. He then introduced his partner, Chad Bianco, who spoke directly about the seriousness of the case. Bianco said that no crime is more important than the injury of a human being, especially a child, and emphasized the enormous resources that went into the effort to find Emmanuel and ensure that justice will be served for this innocent baby.
There is absolutely nothing, no crime more important than the injury of a human being, particularly a child. And the amount of resources that were expended to find this baby and to ultimately bring the people to justice responsible for the loss of this baby, I can't even tell you the amount of resources that were expended in this. It is a massive investigation that will obviously be ongoing, and we appreciate your efforts. This involves a lot of things, though, from us, and hopefully there are more questions to be answered, but I'll end it by saying this before we get into more questions specifically about this case. This was preventable in numerous ways. The amount of response we have had from the public, the enormous anger that a child was not only originally thought to be kidnapped, but then presumably murdered, kind of warms my heart a little bit, that there is compassion still out there. There is care about other people. There is, people actually do care about other people.
Bianco went on to say that there is nothing worse than abusing a baby, breaking bones, causing lifelong trauma, and destroying a child's future. And that's, to put it mildly. He added that if the earlier case involving Jake's daughter Promise had been properly handled, Emmanuel would likely still be alive today. Jake, he said, should have been serving time for permanently disabling his own daughter and never should have had the chance to harm another child again. And next, District Attorney Hestrin announced that just yesterday, murder charges were officially filed against Rebecca and Jake, along with charges for filing a false police report. He then opened the door for questions from the media. And the first question asked was whether authorities had any idea where baby Emmanuel might be, because we are still missing baby Emmanuel. DA Hestrin responded that they do have a strong indication of where the remains could be and that the investigation is ongoing. And that was the exact term he used, a strong indication. When asked what led to the initial search in Moreno Valley, Sheriff Dyka said that without going into great detail, there had been some level of cooperation from the suspects. He added that the media needs to understand that they are dealing with an experienced child abuser, someone familiar with how previous cases were handled, including investigative processes. Next, a reporter asked DA Hestrin to provide details about Jake's previous case. Hestrin explained that in 2018, Jake and his ex-wife were both prosecuted for child abuse, neglect, and cruelty against their infant daughter. The prosecution brought several felony charges and sought a prison sentence. Well, Jake, Hestrin said, pleaded straight to the court, and he clarified that a common misconception: this was not a plea bargain that Jake took. Judges cannot negotiate plea deals directly with defendants, only with prosecutors. But when a defendant, like Jake, pleads straight to the court, they are essentially pleading to all charges and putting themselves at the mercy of the judge. They're playing their hand. Hopefully, the judge takes mercy on them. And in Jake's case, a Riverside County judge did take mercy on him and handed down a suspended sentence, meaning Jake avoided prison but was placed on probation with the prison term looming over him if he violated its conditions. The prosecutor at the time objected, arguing Jake needed to serve prison time for what he did to his daughter. But the judge disagreed and also assigned 180 days of work release, similar to community service. DA Hestrin called that decision, quote, an outrageous error in judgment, end quote. He said Jake should have been in prison at the time of Emmanuel's murder, and if the judge had acted appropriately, Emmanuel would still be alive. It was a chilling moment when he said this. He emphasized that when the criminal justice system fails in this way, it must be called out. Take a listen to that moment.
I will say that it was an outrageous error in judgment by this judge. And I don't have any problem saying that. I'm not attacking the judge personally. That decision was absolutely outrageous. Mr. Haro should have been in prison at the time that this crime happened. And if that judge had done his job as he should have done, Emmanuel would be alive today. And that's a shame, and it's an outrage. And I hate to say that, but when our criminal justice system breaks down, I'm going to just call it like it is and tell you it broke down. It's not how it's supposed to work. The judge had obviously meant well. At the end of their sentence, he told Jake, I'm giving you a big break today. Don't mess it up. But I want to point something out to you. I want to read to you the injuries. The child's name is Carolina. She is still alive today, but she is permanently bedridden. She has permanent damage, cerebral palsy, that is a result of long-term child abuse. I want to read to you the injuries that were presented in court to this judge at the time of that previous prosecution. Acute fracture of the posterior left rib, fifth rib, healing fractures of the posterior lateral 6th, 7th, and 10th through 12th ribs, healing fractures of the 6th and 9th through 12th ribs, partial bone fracture of the skull, brain hemorrhage, significant prevertebral soft tissue swelling of the neck, and a healing tibia fracture of the right leg. This is severe abuse for an infant. And so whatever you think of the criminal justice system and people need a break, someone who does that to a child belongs in prison, period.
This certainly, once again, leads us to believe Jake is the one responsible. Because if Jake had been behind bars, according to investigators, Emmanuel would still be alive. The next question from a reporter, though a bit hard to hear, involved Emmanuel's eye, which, as seen in photos, we've all seen the photos, appears to wander. And whether that indicated abuse has been something many of us have been wondering. Well, DA Hestrin responded saying, quote, "We believe that Emmanuel was severely abused over a period of time. Both parents would have been aware of that abuse," end quote. Take a listen.
We believe that Emmanuel was severely abused over a period of time, and that that's the reason for the filing, the way it was, is that he was abused over a period of time. Both parents would have been aware of that abuse.
Following that moment, our friend Ahmed Beyozo from On the Tira asked the DA to provide more detail about where they believe Emmanuel may be located. Hestrin said that professionals are actively searching for the remains and that the public's help is welcome if anyone has information. He also noted that investigators do have specific areas in mind where they plan to focus their search. As mentioned in the earlier Brian Enton reporting, let's get back to that, a former prosecutor had noted that waste management could make it nearly impossible to locate Emmanuel if he had been disposed of in the trash. Nonetheless, DA Hestrin indicated that investigators do have potential locations in mind and are continuing their search. When asked about the specific roles each parent played in abusing Emmanuel, DA Hestrin said that all he can confirm at this time is that both parents have been charged with murder and filing a false police report. He explained that investigators believe they can prove both are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt for those charges, but exactly how the abuse and actions break down between them will ultimately be revealed at trial. A reporter then asked about rumors that Emmanuel had not been seen for some time. We've heard those rumors, right? We've been wondering, when was the last time Emmanuel was even seen? Well, Hestrin said he could not comment on that and that such details will need to come out during the trial. Regarding Child Protective Services and their involvement, Hestrin confirmed that, to his knowledge, CPS had not been involved in Emmanuel's life at all. There were no active CPS cases open for him, and it appears he had not been monitored or checked on by the child welfare authorities prior to this case, when all of a sudden he was missing and his parents alleged a kidnapping. Next, a reporter asked about Jake making an alleged confession. Take a listen to what was said.
I can tell you that that's not true. It's there's no confession made in jail.
So we will come back to that. But the next question was, how difficult will it be to try the case without locating baby Emmanuel? DA Hestrin acknowledged that a no-body homicide is always challenging. However, he also noted that in this situation, the fact that Emmanuel was an infant makes it clear he could not simply disappear on his own, which strongly indicates that something tragic happened to this baby. Hestrin added that Riverside County prosecutors have significant experience handling no body cases. And I'm saying no body, 2 words, not one. No body. It says a no body case. And he expressed confidence that they will be able to secure convictions here as well if Emmanuel is never found. Another reporter asked again about Jake's alleged jailhouse confession, and the DA responded unequivocally, stating that those reports are not true. Take a listen.
Well, see, that's not true. So I don't know where you, well, no. See, this is what happens when you've got all these folks out there online and these keyboard warriors. You get a lot of misinformation. And what you just said is not true. It's misinformation. So that's what I'll tell you did not happen. Okay? I can't talk about the facts of the case. Well, no, I'm giving you information about baby Emmanuel. I'm giving you information about the cases and the investigation. But what you just said did not happen. And so, it's not, I can't be responsible for when you guys get it wrong.
So this is pretty interesting because Brian Enton said he had an inside source who reported the Perkins tactic taking place. After the press conference, many viewers pointed out to Brian what DA Hestrin had said, and Brian responded in the comments, and I'm going to quote Brian Enton right here, quote, "I stand by my reporting. My sources say there was a Perkins jail operation, what the DA considers to be a usable, legally sound confession I can't speak to, but I stand by what I reported," end quote. Some commenters and viewers also noted that DA Hestrin may not have had all of the facts about certain events, which struck many as unusual. For instance, one reporter brought up a fire at a neighbor's house near Jake and Rebecca, but that DA said he was not aware of it. While the fire may not be directly related to Emmanuel's case, and on the Tira told us on our interview with him that it was not related, still, it has been widely reported as a strange coincidence. One commenter on Brian's video wrote, quote, "The DA did not know the name of Jake's daughter that was abused. He didn't know about the fire across the road. He doesn't seem to know that much. I trust your reporting," end quote. It seems there's a perception among some that Brian's sources may have information that hasn't yet been fully communicated or confirmed by the DA's office, or maybe the inside source was mistaken. We simply do not know. Sheriff Bianco came back to the mic to say this about the spread of misinformation and disinformation, which they are claiming includes the report of Jake confessing to an undercover inmate. Take a listen.
This is to that and to the question before. A problem that we are having in this, basically even on the question that was asked 2 questions ago, is someone posts something on social media and then you all believe that it's true. I actually complimented the mainstream media because you've actually been reaching out to us for comment and actually been printing what we've told you. It hasn't been the sensationalism and the wants for clicks for social media. And that is doing nothing but harming this investigation. And when you form your opinion and come in here and ask questions like that, you're not serving the public in any way. The question way earlier, get some rest. There should be no one out there looking for baby Emmanuel except for us, because all you're going to do is complicate things in the future. And the one thing that I emphasize that I want to make it clear here, the reason this is happening relatively quickly and the reason why we got such a handle on this fast is I believe that the Inland Empire is served better by their 2 sheriff's offices than any place in the state. And this particular case doubled its efforts. So instead of having 4,500 people looking for baby Emmanuel, you had 9,000. And so how did we get all of this information? It's called investigation. And we have 2 entire departments doing nothing but sifting through evidence, searching for evidence, trying to figure out what happened, who was responsible, and how we're going to successfully prosecute it. And misinformation, lies, and purposeful misdirection is going to do nothing but harm this investigation. And I am begging all of you with cameras out here, don't be a part of it. We have an absolute breakdown of the justice system, and we are not preventing other children from being harmed when someone like Jake is allowed to be out on the streets harming children. And so the anger that I have, the frustration that I have, then combined with the misinformation and everything else, when for all of us and our employees, there is nothing more important to us than the death of a human, particularly a child.
The DA also emphasized that the public should avoid conducting their own searches or investigations, warning that it could potentially damage the case. He asked people to let the sheriff's departments handle everything, stating that they know how to do it properly. While it's true that no one should interfere with an active investigation or disrupt a potential crime scene, saying the public isn't helpful at all seems a bit overstated. In modern investigations, recent investigations, the public has often played a key role in solving cases, providing footage, tips, and even physically locating missing persons when law enforcement could not. And an example that stands out to me, especially today, is the murder of Gabby Petito. And the reason I say specifically today it stands out is because today marks 4 years since Gabby's life was cut short. It was the public who helped investigators find that video of Gabby's van, which led to finding Gabby's body. 2 other examples also stand out to me. In the Kylie Rodney case out of Truckee, California, police had already searched the lake and surrounding woods extensively, but it was a volunteer group that located her inside her car just off the bank. And in our reporting about Jaden Spicer, our recent reporting, I spoke about the McCoy couple who helped find a missing man's body in the woods after hundreds of professionals had already searched. So while the DA's warning isn't wrong in principle, and I understand their warnings and encouragement to citizen journalists and to the public to be respectful of this ongoing investigation, it does feel somewhat one-sided to imply the public only interferes. That said, he may be speaking from the perspective of the chaos at the Haro's property, where people allegedly broke in and even sold tours of the home, actions that could have absolutely disrupted a crime scene. And in situations like that, it's absolutely correct that civilians need to stay in their lane. But historically, public involvement has had value in many, many cases. Another reporter asked whether any plea deal had been offered to Jake or to Rebecca, whether one was even a possibility, and if prosecutors were seeking the death penalty. DA Hestron said that this is not a death penalty case because they have not been able to file any special circumstances required for that sentence. He also confirmed that no plea deal has been offered and none will be offered, stating, quote, "We're not interested in bargaining with these individuals. We're interested in a trial and getting justice," end quote. A separate reporter asked about a recent CPS case that was launched after Emmanuel was already missing. And Sheriff Dyka said he could not comment on the specifics, but he noted that Jake was actually the one who made the call about a child potentially being abused. And at that point, the couple's 2-year-old had already been removed from the home. So the call was not about the 2-year-old, but it may have concerned his older son, Eli, who is now in his mother's care. We don't know. We're speculating here. But Eli's mother also recently filed a protective order against Jake for herself and Eli, that we know, which may have prompted Jake to file a report in response. Beyond that, Dykus did not provide further details other than confirming that Jake was the one who placed the call. Interesting new information. Another reporter asked whether, aside from Jake's previous judge and his parents, there were other people who failed Emmanuel or may have turned a blind eye to his ongoing abuse, which we have now learned about as a fact. And DA Hestron responded, quote, "Yes, everyone that was close to this baby failed him," end quote. Lastly, a reporter asked what's next in the case. The DA said that the investigation will continue, followed by the start of the prosecution. The case has been officially filed and will proceed through the criminal justice system. The next scheduled court date is September 4th. While the arrest warrants for Jake and Rebecca aren't publicly available, we do have their felony complaint forms and booking sheets to examine, and they give us even more details about what law enforcement believe happened to baby Emmanuel. In the felony complaint, it states, on or about August 5th, 2025, through and including August 14th, 2025, in the county of Riverside, state of California, the defendants did willfully and unlawfully murder Emmanuel, end quote. If proven true, this timeline suggests Emmanuel may have been killed as early as 9 days before Rebecca reported him kidnapped from the Big Five parking lot. The second count in the complaint concerns the reported kidnapping. The state alleges that on August 14th, Rebecca and Jake knowingly filed a false police report to a police officer, deputy sheriff, or member of the California Highway Patrol claiming a felony and misdemeanor had been committed. And interestingly, while the DA has stated, and the complaint suggests, that Jake and Rebecca are charged with the same crimes, their booking sheets show some differences. Jake's booking sheet lists 2 counts of murder with malice, which can indicate separate counts or theories of the same killing, along with false report of a crime, willful harm to a child, felon possessing a firearm, and department child jurisdiction. And so Rebecca's booking sheet lists murder with malice, false report of a crime, first-degree murder, and department child jurisdiction. This reflects slight differences in how the charges are formally recorded for each defendant, even though the overarching allegations remain largely the same. So Jake's booking sheet lists murder with malice, which is a general murder charge, while Rebecca's sheet lists felony first-degree murder, a more serious charge that alleges premeditation. If accurate, this means Rebecca is currently being charged with a higher level of murder than Jake, though these charges could change as investigators gather more information. They can always change. But I'll be honest, this is confusing to me because this press conference on Wednesday, that we just talked about, they clearly stated in that press conference that if Jake had been behind bars for the abuse, severe abuse of his daughter, Emmanuel would still be alive. Again, showing that Jake would be the responsible party.
Mr. Haro should have been in prison at the time that this crime happened. And if that judge had done his job as he should have done, Emmanuel would be alive today. And that's a shame, and it's an outrage.
Yet, charges show first-degree murder for Rebecca. Jake also faces a willful harm to a child charge, which Rebecca does not. Both have the charge department child jurisdiction, which refers to a legal proceeding in which the court intervenes to protect a child or dependent who is alleged to be abused, neglected, or otherwise in need of care and supervision. This likely references the 2-year-old who was previously removed from their care. And lastly, before we end, during the court hearing, Ahmed from On the Tira could be heard saying hola to Rebecca. Take a listen.
Walking.
Hola.
He was reprimanded for his actions and later spoke about it online. Let's hear that.
Trust me when I tell you, I will never, ever, ever, ever have a lapse in judgment of that magnitude against. So I apologize to you, I apologize to the county, I apologize to the judge, to the sheriff department, and I apologize to the community at large because that was very, very unprofessional of me. And so moving forward, I've learned from this mistake, and I am not above acknowledging my faults, homie, on the tira. And so thank you so much, everybody. That's the latest here from Riverside, California.
That is all of the updates we have for now, but it's actually quite a lot to think about and digest. We'll continue to monitor this case closely as we always have and to share new information as it becomes available. So please hit subscribe and hit notifications. And above all, we continue our hope that baby Emmanuel's remains can be recovered so that alongside justice, he can finally be properly laid to rest. And I want to end with something said in Wednesday's press conference. It hit a chord with me because as the world has shown up to care for baby Emmanuel, I have felt similarly. Baby Emmanuel is loved by many, and may justice be served.